Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the Kingfisher Knits podcast. My name is Madeleine and I'm talking to you from my home in Zurich, where I live with my husband and our two small children, although I am originally from the UK. And this is a podcast where I talk about my adventures in knitting and a little bit also about my work as a knitwear designer, and occasionally I mention my tech editing. So I would like to start off this episode by saying welcome back to any of my previous viewers, and hello if this is the first time you're checking me out. I'm really grateful that you've decided to take some time and sit down, watch my podcast and chat a little bit about what we're knitting. I also did want to mention that I was really thrilled to find when I logged onto YouTube yesterday that we had hit 500 subscribers, which is really encouraging. So thank you very much for all of you who have clicked subscribe, and if there's anyone out there who is still watching and would like to click subscribe, please by all means do. I have, now that we've hit the mark of 500, I guess one can dare to dream, and I was actually thinking about what kind of special prize package I could put together in the future if we should ever hit 1,000, which I think for me would be the mark to do a really special giveaway. Anyway, tiny bit of admin just to mention again that we do have a couple of ongoing CALs. One is the garment Firsts KAL, and the other is a shawl CAL, which involves two of my patterns which I released last year. So that is the Artemis shawl and the Stracciatella shawl. I will put links down to the threads for those CALs down below so you can check them out. But for those of you who are interested in the information about when those were going to be finishing, the shawl CAL I'm going to round up around Easter time. I have to double check the dates because I can never seem to remember these things. Whereas the garment First KAL I was planning on finishing at the end of March. But let me know if you think if there's any particular issue with that. But we already have a fair few FOs. I finished a couple of garments myself for that CAL, both of which I showed to you last week. With no further ado, I want to go into, I don't normally have a segment of what I'm wearing, but last week I showed you off my two FOs were my arboreal sweater, which was also a yoked colourwork sweater, which I have in front of me, but I have it inside out to show you something in a moment. But the arboreal sweater is by Jennifer Steingass. But what I'm wearing right now is my test knit that I did for Eli of Skeindeer. This is the Blåfjell Sweater. I knit mine with short sleeves though, which is not the original design, let's say, but of course one can always choose to do whatever sleeve length one wants. Anyway, that was pre-agreed with Eli that I would do a short sleeve version. So I promised that I would wear it this week so that you could actually see it on me. Just a reminder, I knit this out of Holst Supersoft. That's a light fingering weight yarn, which comes with the spinning oil still on the yarn, and then when you wash it, it sort of blooms and fluffs up and fills up a lot of the gaps. So don't want to repeat myself too much about things that I don't want to repeat myself too much about the things that I particularly love about this. I mean, I think it's a beautiful design. I'm loving that I made it short sleeved. I'll pop up just a little bit just so you can see. It's sort of a normal length top, I would say. Normally I would do my sweaters a little bit longer, but as I considered this more of a top, I did it just sort of, it's just hitting right, like my hip bone is right here, so it's just about there. And I really think the yoke design is absolutely beautiful, and you know what I thought about working with the yarn, in that I really like it, but I did struggle, but I have a feeling that that's a little bit of a learning process. One thing that I hinted about last time, which I did want to touch on, was I mentioned I had some hand pain. I have now been to see my doctor, so I just wanted to briefly touch on that. I don't see why people would necessarily be interested, but I don't think it's that uncommon of an issue for knitters, although we can have all kinds of hand pain. The hand pain that I was having specifically was mostly to do with this part of my hand. So I did have some issues over here in the past that I tend to strain my wrist sometimes. That's just a problem that I personally have, and that isn't particularly to do with the knitting, but obviously it can make knitting uncomfortable. But I don't think I've ever done that from knitting. I've strained my wrist doing other things, and then that's a problem. in this time I had pain here, and I actually had tingling and numbness. Not strongly numbness, but that kind of slight feeling that maybe, you know, when your hand falls asleep, when you lean on it too much or something. So I was a bit worried about that because I've heard a lot, and while I did not study biology, I studied chemistry. I did a fair few courses about let's say, more medically related things, and had friends who were medical students and what have you. So I know that when you start having actual tingling and numbness, it's more than just a strain. You should be aware, because perhaps it can mean there's nerve issues, and also the blood flow is being cut off to an area, and that's never good. Anyway, the nerve that you feel here is the ulnar nerve, and that actually runs through your elbow down here. So often you can have problems where you feel this tingling sensation all the way up that side, and I did have that a couple of times. I had actually banged my funny bone a little while back, and I think this was all connected, that there was some inflammation down here. I still feel a bit of sensitivity and tenderness down here, but I'm not having problems in my hand anymore. And the doctor had checked me out. I'd actually been to see my chiropractor. He checked me out and said it was definitely not tendinitis. I didn't have any major problems whatsoever there. But I wanted to mention it in case that has something that's happened to anybody. And I'm not saying that because it wasn't particularly serious for me, it might not be for you. And I'm not saying that because you have a pain of some kind that you have a problem that you necessarily have to be checked out. I'm just conveying what happened to me. And I really found that a problem when I was knitting with the small, very slick, higher needles, quite, you know, small ones. I was using 3mm, especially for the stocking stitch here, and then 2.75 for the ribbing. And with this very fine yarn and a bit of oddness and pain I was having, I think this led to me enjoying the process a little bit less at the time, and also struggling with the gauge, as I spoke about. That feels like a lot of information that maybe is of no interest to anybody, so I hope you're all still with me. I just want to talk a little bit about the fit of the garment, because now I'm actually wearing it. I'm generally very happy with the fit. There are a couple of issues for me, and I think that none of them can be pinned down to one particular thing. And one is the sleeves here, and I think this is my problem with my hands, and I may well come back and rip this out a little bit because there's just a bit too much fabric here for me. I have found often in patterns, not always, that if I knit the correct size for my bust, the sleeves often have a bit too much ease in them, at least at the very top of the arm for me. And I don't know if that's something about my anatomy. I really don't know. So I may go back and solve that. I don't think it looks terrible by any means. I just notice it sometimes. The other issue, it's not an issue, but the fact of the matter is, this yarn is so lightweight, and in this particular pattern I'm using the pattern is a 24 stitches over 10 centimeter gauge, which for a light fingering weight is a very loose gauge, so you would expect to get a drapey fabric. But the point is, this yarn weighs so little that it has no weight to it. So it has no, what's the right word? It doesn't have the right drape because it doesn't have weight to it. It doesn't, if you push it out like that, it stays. It doesn't hang back down but under its own weight. And I think that that's just exasperating that issue a little bit. And the same issue, I think, is part of the reason why, if you see, there is a gap here. So this sweater is designed to come up, like right up to your neck, which is really nice. And it was an intentional design feature of Ellie, because she said so many of these yoke sweaters have very open necklines. Not all of them do, but many of them do. And so she wanted hers to be nice and up around your neck, but not a turtleneck, just up to your neck. And it has short row shaping at the back there. But what you might notice is happening on me is that it's sometimes, not always, like I've just pulled it there to make it clearer. There's a gap here. And I think this comes down to the problem I just said about the fabric not having weight to it. So it doesn't just sort of, it doesn't fall down because it has any weight. It's so light that it just like floats almost there. I think that I mentioned last time that I had a tighter gauge here, and then the rest of the colour work, which is exactly the wrong place to have a tighter gauge, because this is the section, as often is the case, which has the same stitch count all the way. There's no increases in this part. And so ideally that part would be probably just a touch, like not all off the shoulder, but just a touch down there. That would make this to come down, and this should lay maybe a bit flatter. But again, with this yarn that doesn't weigh anything, it just sort of stands up by itself. It doesn't just press down against the skin. And it's just a touch baggy. And that's probably, again, my mismatching gauge because of the issues I had. I don't think that any of them come from the design whatsoever. I think it's a combination of my knitting, this style of neck, and using this yarn. I spoke about all of that much longer than I thought I would, but I kind of think it's all, these are all the pieces of information and things that came into my mind since wearing this. I've been wearing this quite a lot since I finished it. I really like it. And I do really want to knit with this yarn again. I just don't think I'll be knitting it at this gauge. So I did want to quickly talk about something I mentioned last time and which I was asked about, which was spit splicing. Some people like to call it wet splicing because they don't like to use the word spit. Fine. And all of these garments that I've been knitting recently have been 100% wool, non-superwash, and that means that they can be spit spliced. And what that means, I feel like everybody knows this, but I learn so much from podcasts all the time, so maybe I just wanted to explain a little bit more of that term in case, as I knew at least one person told me that they wanted to know more about it. So this is spit splicing. Basically, is felting together yarn so that you can join two balls. So you finish one ball and you want to join the next one. And so you don't have to just stop knitting with one, leaving an end that you have to weave in, start knitting with the next one. You can join those two ends of the yarn together and you have a great join and you can just keep knitting. You don't waste, and especially for me, you don't have yarn ends to weave in at the end of the project, which is really nice. And so the criteria for being able to do this is that the yarn must felt. That means it cannot be superwash treated. This also won't work with non-animal fibers, but it should work with all non-treated animal fibers. So cashmere also, and alpaca, all of the anything that's non-superwash. And you can even have blends which have, like for example, non-superwash wool blended with some nylon, or even other man-made fibers and even plant fibers, and they may still it may still work. It's just not a given. It just depends how well that wool is going to work and do the joining for you when it felts together. Some people like to call it wet splicing and to do it with water. I have found in my experience that it doesn't work as well. I'm not saying you can't do it. People do it, so you must be able to do it. But I feel that probably maybe works better on really like 100% non-superwash sheep's wool. I found it much easier to spit splice when I used spit. This is the yarn which I use for my arboreal sweater. This is Snelden, it's a 3-ply worsted weight yarn. And this is 100% wool, non-superwash. One thing that is a tip to do when you are spit splicing, so I'm just going to take a piece of this yarn, I just broke it like that, is to unwind. Many places say about an inch. I would say at least an inch, up to 2 inches. You want to unwind your plies. If it's a single ply yarn, you just want to sort of smoosh it out a little bit. And I think you should always remove some of your yarn. So if you had a 2-ply yarn, you would remove 1 ply from each of them just for that section you pulled out. This is a 3-ply yarn, so what I did was I removed 1 ply in each case. So the little bit where I then felted it together was a little bit thicker. But what I find is that by felting it together, it shrinks down a little bit. So it's better to risk that it's a touch too bulky for me than to risk that it's a bit too thin, if that makes sense. So when you have something that's single ply, you might just try and tease out some of the actual individual fibers of the wool, but I wouldn't put it down to half. And I think when I was doing the Supersoft, which is really fine yarn, that's 2-ply, and I'm not sure I actually separated the plies. I think I just kept it all because I felt like I had nothing much to work with otherwise, because they're very fine, each of the plies. Anyway, in this one, what I was doing is, see, pulling out, here I have, 3 plies. So I'm just going to pull off 1 of those plies, so I've still got 2. And I'm doing the same thing on the other one, pulling off 1 of those plies. Then it's not particularly glamorous, but I'm gonna put them together on top of each other. This is not really a tutorial. There are plenty of good tutorials out there. Just people told me that they were interested in what I was talking about, so I thought I could show you what I do. So you're just sort of loosely trying to wind those over each other together. Then you have to add some spit. Yeah, you get some fibres in your mouth, but I don't care. Can't believe I'm like sucking wool on camera. Okay, and then you want to felt them together, which means felting you need moisture and you need friction. And you can do it between your hands. I find that it works okay, but it can take quite a while. The best thing to do is if you have a pair of jeans on, like I do right now, I just like roll it back and forth on my jeans, and that really helps to add that extra friction that you need. So now I'm just really gonna hope that this works. And sometimes it doesn't work the first time, and what I do is I just test it, and then if it doesn't work, you just do it again. But you do want to give it a little test, because it's not very nice to knit with a non-well done join and then it unravel, because that's a problem. Then you don't have other ends to work with. You have to rip, in my experience, you would have to rip back. So here's my join. You can probably just see it's here, that it's a little bit thicker than what's around it. You can keep rubbing if you want, but if I pull, I'm pulling quite hard. It's not going anywhere. So that's perfectly fine to knit with. So I've joined one ball to the next. Okay, I was pretending I had just a bit, which I've rejoined. I'm really sorry for the banging noises. There is work going on in the apartment above me. They're literally in the room above me right now, and they're banging quite hard. I can hear it loud. I hope you don't hear it too much. Okay, back to what I was talking about, split splicing. And you have, yeah, no ends to weave in, and that's wonderful. One thing I would say is what I still try and do in the same way. So this is my arboreal sweater inside out. So as I look at some floats, for those of you who like to see the wrong side. So I changed balls. I had 50-gram balls, so I've split spliced at least twice in this whole set, in this section of knitting here. Oh, there's a thread. There we go, on there. And what I would do is I still wouldn't split splice right in the middle of, you know, a sea of stockinette. I still try and do it towards the edges. Maybe not exactly at the beginning of round or what have you, or anything like that, but around an area where you would normally be happy to change yarn if you were going to be weaving in the ends. It's just a preference of mine. So that's what I do. So if I'm knitting and I can see I'm not going to have enough yarn to get beyond, you know, if I'm here and I can see I'm not going to have enough yarn to get back to the other side, I would probably stop, unpick a few stitches to go back and just break my yarn early and split splice it there, so that I don't end up, if I have a slightly bumpier stitch, I'd rather it not be right in the middle, or especially on the front, but also on the back. I wouldn't want it to be right in the middle of the fabric. I'd rather it was, you know, hidden away on the side of the garment. So I hope that makes sense. I would say if you're not sure that a yarn is going to split splice, you just try it like I just did on a bit. And if it doesn't work the first time, do try again, because I've had yarns which I knew were 100% non-superwash wool, and the first time I tried to split splice, for whatever reason, I didn't do it well enough, and it didn't work. But you can tell. You'll rub them together all you want, and when you pull, they'll still come apart if you can't split splice. So I will link to Very Pink, the wonderful Very Pink on YouTube. She has a tutorial on split splicing. And she also has a tutorial on 3 other types of join, which you can use on non-superwash. You can use on superwash yarns as well. I believe in most of them, like the Russian join, which I've used a few times, and both of those all involve, you know, joining one end of yarn to another in different ways. And again, you wouldn't have to weave in ends at the end. So I'm going to put both of those videos in the show notes so you can check those out. All right, so that is enough about what I'm wearing at split splicing. That has taken up a lot more time than I thought it would, but hey. I'm only going to talk to you about, good job then, that I'm only going to talk to you about one whip this week. I have been doing a lot of design swatching again, and I can't show you that, and that's that. Okay, so living in my beautiful woodland themed project bag. This is from Jessie Marie Makes on Etsy and has my beautiful foxes on the inside. Really love this bag. Is this sweater that I'm knitting for my son, and that is going to be, it's a design as well. So I am using this beautiful yarn. I spoke about it last week. This is 100% non-superwash merino yarn. This is the Helena Aran, it's Aran weight. This was the Helena base from Posh Yarn, which is a discontinued yarn already for quite some time, I believe, but and it's just a beautiful yarn that I picked up on a D-stash in this beautiful, the colorway is Gilly, but it's just all these beautiful autumnal tones. I'm having to alternate skeins because there is definitely, both to avoid pooling and to avoid there being clear changes when you change from one ball to the other, but that's really not bothering me. That's exactly the type of yarn that one needs to alternate skeins with. So when I showed this to you last, I had definitely started the body and I feel like I've been doing a sleeve, but I already forgot. Anyway, so now I have so this is bottom up, and I have now united the body with the sleeves, but it's exactly at that moment where it's just been united. It's not looking super clear or nice at what it is, but anyway, this is the back, and this is the front. And let me just pull on that a little bit. The eagle eye among you might notice that once I've joined the sleeves on the front, I've started working in a texture, having texture here on this part. So this will be this bit of the sweater. The sleeves are being worked. So I'm working this on 5mm needles. I did my ribbing on 4mm needles. 4s are a US 6. So I believe 4mm needles are US 6. And I believe that 5mm needles are a US 8. And I'm working this lovely cable up the arm there. So here you can see that even though I'm alternating skeins, you can see that that striping there and even a little bit of pooling. But I mean, it's nothing. I don't actually mind it. I don't like it. Comes up way clearer on the camera than it does by the eye. That's just the way things are. Your eye blends these things together much more. And this is the other sleeve. So I have done the cables going the opposite ways on the two sleeves. I think for this particular cable design that I'm using here, it's not the end of the world if you wanted to use the same cable on both. I don't know yet what I'm going to say in the pattern, if I'm going to say that I recommend people use mirrored cables. I mean, of course, if I say that you want to use mirrored cables, I will have both of them provided. I'm not going to expect you to work it out yourself. But I really like this cable pattern here. And what else I wanted to say about this? So it is a bottom-up design, and it's going to have saddle shoulder shaping. So what I wanted to do to show you what that was, in case you are not familiar with saddle shoulder shaping, because here you can't tell yet, I haven't really started the shoulder shaping, I've just joined all the pieces together. So it is a bottom-up seamless design. At the very end, so I've put stitches from the sleeves and stitches from the body on hold here. That's not looking very clear because there's so many strands of yarn here. That's the problem with alternating skeins, but hey. I just used some bright orange sock yarn there. Those stitches from the bottom and from the body and from the sleeves will be Kitchener together at the end, and any gaps closed with that yarn that's used to Kitchener. Okay, so I'm going to put this down because you can't really see much more about that. And I'm going to talk about saddle shoulder shaping by showing you another design of mine. This is the Bernina cardigan. This is a pattern of mine which I have. It's in 4 sizes, starting at 6 months, going up to 2 to 3 years. So there's 4 different sizes. And this is a saddle shoulder shaping. So after you join, so this was a cardigan, so it wasn't worked in the round, obviously. But after you join your sleeves, you have different types of decreases, which are going to shape the sleeve cap and the shoulder for you. I really find this saddle shoulder shaping very aesthetically pleasing. It generally fits for a seamless design. So you can have sweaters that are worked in the round and are seamless with a proper sleeve cap. Ones where you'll work most of the body in the round, okay, some bits back and forth. You'll pick up your sleeves, work short rows for a sleeve cap, and and what have you, and those of course fit very well. They're more like classical tailoring lines. But typically in the round, for seamless sweaters in the round, you have yoke sweaters with circular yokes. Like this one doesn't have to have colour work. They can still have other designs or just be plain, but they would be a circular yoke where this whole section is worked in the round with increases worked throughout, or decreases if you're working bottom up. Those can be really, really flattering. They can fit really, really well, but they can also not fit great. There are raglans, which again, it depends, and there are different styles of raglans. There are more relaxed ones and sort of modified raglans. There's of course drop shoulders. I didn't mention that. That's another one, but that's like, for me though, that's slightly separate because that's clearly you want you've got a line down here where your sleeve starts down here and your body is typically more boxy on a drop shoulder. Anyway, I'm talking more about trying to make a fitted sweater. And a saddle shoulder shaping works really, really well. I particularly like the look of a saddle shoulder sweater on a man. My husband has quite a few store-bought ones, and I really, really like them. So I've always liked it. And when I think I first read about them in Elizabeth Zimmerman's book, Knitting Without Tears, which I have. Yeah, so you have this beautiful line for shaping of the shoulder cap. And what I particularly liked and what I used on this design as well is that I had a cable, which I'm doing again, I guess. Actually, I hadn't really thought about it. I just really like it. I have a cable going up the sleeve, and it can go all the way up the shoulder, all the way up to the neckline as well. And I really, really like that. So this particular one, I worked as a cardigan, obviously with the same cables here, and I just have like a little higher neckline. So you've got a more raised neckline here at the back, just by working a few short rows in that part there. This particular cardigan, bunny knit cardigan, the pattern is available in my Ravelry store. I worked this in a mohair wool, and this one actually has some nylon in blend from La Belle Bouclette, which are, they have a farm with their own Angora goats, and they sell their mohair yarn, both undyed and now dyed, from Canada. I will link them below. This yarn is kind of a sport weight, but the gauge, it's a meaty sport weight. So the gauge is 22 stitches over 10 centimeters or 4 inches. So you can also use a fair few DK weight yarns that you could also use that, but sport to DK weight works really well. So yeah, this is a really sweet little sweater, which actually when I knit it for my son. And he grew really fast. I mean, so this sweater that I'm making him, I'm making it in what will be for me the 4 to 6 year size. He's 3 1/4, but he would never fit in something that's age 3. And when I knit this sweater, he wouldn't fit in this. So actually, you may see photos of a little boy wearing this on the pattern page, and that's not my son. That's my friend's son, who is a few months younger and still fit into this when I made this design. And I have these little fox buttons. These I just bought at our local sort of department store. They had those really nice buttons. So I think I will talk, obviously a little bit about more about that. Probably, I mean, I've been working on this pretty fast. I didn't say actually, but hey, I'm all about honesty. Here I've knit, let me see, 4 rounds since joining the sleeves, and I've knit them twice. So last night I knit those 4 rounds, and the night before I knit those 4 rounds, but wrong. So I had to rip back and go back to rejoining the sleeves. So I have been working on this, but the last few days progress has been slow because I've been an idiot. Anyway, enough about that whip. I'm really, really excited about that project actually, so I'm really, really happy to show it to you when it's finished and get some of your feedback. All right, so that's the only whip I'm showing you, but I have 2 FOs to show you. I'm cheating because one is an FO which I finished a very long time ago. I would have to think hard about when I actually finished knitting this, but it's only been in my possession from now. And that is because it is a design that I knit. It was the first design that I had published by Sweet Georgia Yarns, which if you know my designs, you'll know I now have several published with Sweet Georgia Yarns. They are they call themselves an artisan hand-dyed yarn company. They are based in Vancouver, Canada. They have the most beautiful yarns. I've worked with several of their bases now. I don't think I've ever worked with the same base twice, actually, which is quite fun. And their colours are absolutely to die for. If you don't know them, you really should. And They're one of the fairly well-known hand-dyeing yarn companies because they do a lot of wholesale. So you can find them, I think, well, all over the world is maybe a strong statement, but all over in lots of places in North America, but also in the UK for sure. I'm not sure how many places in Europe have their yarns, but I know they have a section on their website about where you can find their yarns in stores. Anyway, they also have a lovely audio podcast, which you can find on iTunes, Sweet Georgia Show, I think it's called, and Felicia, who is the founder, she also has a video vlog podcast. I think she calls it a vlog, which she's putting out quite frequently at the moment, also on YouTube. All right, this is my first design, as I said, that I did with them, and it's called Ondicelle. So Ondicelle is Italian for little waves. It is a stole, and it is a very sizable stole, and it is worked in 2 different yarn weights. So when they put out this call, this was specifically a call where they wanted designs done mixing yarn bases. So this was in their fall 2016 collection. Is that right? Yes, that's right. So it is a big rectangular wrap, a proper wrap or a stole that you can totally wrap around yourself. I'll show it to you a little bit closer now. It is worked in 2 yarn bases. There is a fingering weight yarn base, which you're seeing here in the solid colour. This is their colourway Sky, and this is worked in their CashLuxe Fine, which is a merino cashmere. Is it nylon or silk? I don't remember right now. I don't think it has written on here, and I didn't check that up. Anyway, CashLuxe Fine. It's a well-known yarn of theirs. It's probably up there with one of my all-time favourite fingering weight yarns. It is absolutely beautiful to work with. So this is the Sky colourway, and this is paired with their Superwash worsted. So that is 100% Superwash merino worsted weight yarn, and this particular one here, which you see, is the Tooth Fairy. But this design would work in so many different colour combinations. And you have these drop stitches. In the majority, you're working the drop stitches with the fingering weight, the CashLuxe Fine, and you're having these garter bumps in the worsted weight, and then every now and then you have a section where you work the drop stitches in the worsted weight as well. And you start and end with a band of the worsted weight in both cases, which adds a nice weight to the ends. I was thinking recently, you know, if you're someone who doesn't particularly like that look, you could also just have a couple of garter bumps at the beginning in this yarn. You don't have to do this. I liked it. That was part of my design. But you could just have it. Basically, all of the shawl worked in this pattern, and just starting with a little bit of that. So yeah, this is Ondicelle. It has been on sale in my Ravelry store for a while now. I got the rights to the pattern back quite a while ago, but they wanted to keep hold of the sample so that they could take it to TNNA in Las Vegas towards the end of last year. Or was it in January this year? I feel like it was in January this year, actually. So, I'm just gonna... So it's really nice to have that back home again. And I haven't worn it yet because I wanted to show it off to you guys still in its perfect sample knit state. Okay. And the other FO that I have to show you is one of my designs, but I did not knit it. So you know that I've been collaborating with Amy of Stranded Dye Works for my shawl design. I haven't got my sample with me here. Actually, it's hanging up in my wardrobe. But this is the design, which is in 3 different yarn bases. I have named the design now. I will put how it's written down below, but it is pronounced Collyheen, and this is Irish Gaelic for ripple. And there are 3 different yarn weights in the shawl: fingering weight, DK weight, and mohair silk lace weight. I say mohair silk lace weight every time rather than just lace weight, because I think in this pattern you could use lace weight if you want, but part of the point of it is using a mohair silk lace weight for the effect it gives. So I have been having this in test knitting. Selma of the Little Big Knits podcast is currently knitting her test knit. And another one of the test knitters who is super, super speedy is Sarah Hepworth, and she finished in lightning speed time, and she has sent me it as a sample. And here it is. As you can see, it's got quite a decent size to it. And those of you who were watching when I was knitting mine may notice or remember, so this is smaller than mine, and that's intentional. In mine, I was possibly got a little bit carried away and used up all the yarn and ended up with an enormous shawl, which I'm very happy with, but I was aware that it probably wasn't of massive appeal to everybody else to have quite such a massive shawl. I still wanted a good size shawl, and you can see this still is. There are two sizes in the pattern. This is the large. There is a smaller version. And what you may also notice, so this is still, it is a shawl worked on the basis of a half pie shawl in the sense that it has it has shaping rows. It's not shaped all the time like many shawls are, where you will always be shaping at the edges and maybe in the middle as well. But there are specific rows where you will increase your stitches, and then all the other rows are just worked, even without stitch counts. That normally makes a semicircular shawl, and you will probably notice that this is not quite semicircular, which I really like. So it is wider. So half its width is more than its depth. So it's like a deep crescent shawl, which I really love crescent shawls, but I often find they're not deep enough. So this is a deep crescent shawl, I would call it, or a stretched half circle, as I think Sarah called it. And just to show you up close the different yarn plays that you've got that are going on there. And you finish there at the bottom. So just to tell you which colours these are, in the DK weight, this is the leftover yarn. This is her castaway base, 100% superwash merino, and this is the heliograph colourway, which is just amazing. I really think it looks fabulous, and I really love the garter rib for the border, because when you have that switching between stocking stitch, which are the two stitches in stocking stitch basically, and the garter, you really get to see the best, I think, of hand-dyed colourways. Sometimes you can really see how it looks with the different textures. And the fantastic mohair here is her Modern Love colourway. This is, I mean, I know all these colourways of Amy because I watch her podcast, the Stranded podcast, but every time I get one of Amy's yarns, even ones which I fall in love with the moment I see them, they're always more beautiful in person. And like, I like pink, but neither of these are ones that I've ever seen her show off and said, oh, I really would love to see, love to have some of those. And now that I have some in my possession, it's just to die for. So beautiful. So that's Modern Love. And in this one, the fingering weight, so you might remember in my shawl, the fingering weight was variegated. In this case, the fingering weight is a semi-solid or a tonal colourway, and that is her ever so popular Shiner colourway. And again, I've always thought Shiner looked nice, and Amy's knit things in Shiner, and I thought that's lovely. And I had Shiner on the mohair, and it was really, really beautiful. And seeing it now on this base, where I just think you can really appreciate the colour. So it's just this beautiful, beautiful grey with like a lavender tone, a beautiful lavender tone. It's a lavender grey, but you can see that the colours are mixing. And it just makes this beautiful, beautiful tonal quality to this yarn. So I'm just blown away every time I see Amy's yarn in person. Yeah, so this is the Collyheen shawl. Ripple, hopefully you can see why it's called Ripple. For what the design made me think about. And Amy and I have picked a release date for this collaboration. So that is set currently. We will, of course, update you all on Instagram and the like, but set to be Friday, March 23rd. So the plan is that Amy will be putting together different kits. As far as I'm aware, not just the colourway combinations that I have used or Sarah has used or that she has sent to Selma, but possibly other combinations too. And that these will be going into her shop on Friday the 23rd in kits, which will include the pattern. And I will also be launching the pattern on Ravelry. Oh, I was totally blown away when I saw this, and I really do not want to toot my own horn. I was bowled over. Like when I saw this, I was just like, that's so beautiful. Those colours are beautiful. Amy did an amazing job. Sarah knit this beautifully. Her knitting is absolutely impeccable.
and it smells lovely. I think, yeah, she must have used some soak. It smells quite a lot like one of the soaks that I have, or Eucalan. I can never remember which one's which. I was just blown away by how beautiful it was, and didn't even hit me when I first saw it that that was my design or anything. I just thought that is so beautiful, and I felt so grateful to have it. So what I'm actually going to do now is send this off to Amy so that she can see it and show it off and the like. And then hopefully, I hope it will come back to me. We shall see. If Amy wants to show it off, if she's going to any more shows or what have you, then I totally understand. But we shall see where it ends up. But I just think it's so, it's such a lovely showcase of colour and of yarn weights and yarn bases, and it's just a lot of fun to knit. So I have a feeling I will be knitting another one of those at some point. Okay, so that is everything that I had on my list to show you today. I don't have any stash enhancement or anything like that. I was going to go over some of the prizes for the KALs, but I think I'm going to leave that out for this episode. I feel like I've been talking a lot. I actually have a slightly sore throat now, so I'm going to leave that off for today. None of those are pressing. None of those things are wrapping up next week. So I will show those off the next time that I podcast, which hopefully again should not be too long. I think this time I did a week and a half between podcasts, so probably it'll be more like 2 weeks, but it may be sooner. So I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody. I know that in a lot of Europe it is snowing right now. We have actually, not that I'm English, I have to talk about the weather, okay? Let me talk about the weather just for 1 second, which is to say it's been snowing a lot, and in Zurich is somewhere where it often snows in the winter, and we've had the coldest week. It's been -10 and even lower at times in the night, but we'd be getting up in the morning and it was -10 and no snow, just completely cold and grey, not even the sun except for one day, so not particularly fun weather. I mean, I don't mind it being cold because I can throw on all my knitwear, but I like there being the bonus of beautiful crisp days with some sun or the snow. And this morning we woke up and it's not a ton of snow, but there is a lovely covering of white snow everywhere. So that's made me extra cheerful. So I hope that everybody is not too inconvenienced by the snow and that you can enjoy it. I'm going to be out with the kids this afternoon playing in the snow. So I will see you all again soon. And until then, I hope you have a good time. Bye.